Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and this is TV7's Israel at War update. And in today's edition, we're going to discuss a whole variety of issues, particularly, of course, on Israel's immediate vicinity, broader challenges at hand. But before so, I'll introduce our guests for today, to include Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence of Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. Next to him is Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish, who is the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. And last but not least, Ms. Zineb Ribour, who is a research fellow at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C., where she's also the manager of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East. It's great to see all three of you. And we will start today with the latest report. During the afternoon hours, we saw an Israel Air Force precision strike, intelligence-driven, of course, against the Iranian proxy Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Damascus, broad daylight. General Sofrin, what can you tell us about that?
I think that Israel is conveying a message to the new regime in Syria. That means that, first of all, we will not tolerate the fact that you will go southwards. That means that all the area of south of Damascus will be an area without any armed groups and any other armed forces, because this is endangering Israel. And of course, endangering the Druze who are living in the southern part of Syria. The second issue is that we won't allow any attempt of terror groups to get into Damascus or any other area in Syria that may endanger Israel, and we will react immediately. That means this is some kind of transformation if you compare it to what used to be before October 7, when we hit several places sometimes, not on daylight, but this time we changed the rules of the game, and now every attempt to establish something as infrastructure of terror organization inside Syria is going to be demolished immediately.
Absolutely. General Gavish, on Syria proper, if we look on broad terms, of course, there's still ongoing efforts by the al-Julani regime to consolidate its power over all Syria. It seems, however, that his arrangement with the Kurds is not necessarily a one-stop shop deal, but rather a transition period for the course of even a whole year before the Kurds will even consider changing the current military composition of what they have under, of course, U.S. leadership. The forces of the United States are still in northwestern Syria, but we're looking also south, and Israel is also very adamant to ensure, as General Sofrin mentioned, no threats to the state of Israel or the civilian communities of southern Syria.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, and I fully concur with the Amnon Sofrin. And I think we should go to the strategic level, and within the strategic level, we always talked about the four pillars of the strategy of the defense strategy of Israel, and I think that it is not official yet, but everyone understands that we need the fifth pillar to our national defense, and this is denying potential threat toward Israel. And I think this is, if we're looking at the behavior of Israel, this is exactly what we are doing. We are going to deny every potential threat toward Israel. And this is basically what is being seen now in Syria. And as I said, I concur with Amnon on all the other things. On the south part of Syria, of course, there are the Druze. And here we have to remember that in Israel, we have a large Druze community. There is very close relations between the Druze in Israel and the Druze in Syria. We have to remember that the Druze community in Israel, this is one of the most contributing community within Israel. I don't know if everyone knows it, but the amount of people that goes to the military in Israel within the Druze community is the highest on every other community in Israel, including the Jewish. So they are very loyal to Israel. They are part of us. They are fighting along shoulder with us. And I think that we are, there is an obligation for us as a state to the Druze here in Israel. And if their brothers are in arm and in bad times, we should support them. And Israel is already literally doing it. And this is another interest that Israel have, even from a moral point of view, in the south part of Syria. And we'll see what will happen between the Julani government and with the Druze in Syria. But from the Israeli point of view, we strongly support the Druze, and I just explained what is the reason for it.
Of course, there were reports about some type of arrangement reached between the Al-Julani de facto ruler of Damascus and the Druze in the Sweda governorate, and it was very quickly refuted, of course, also by the spiritual leader and de facto leader of Sweda, Hikmet al-Hajari, who came out and stated, including the forces subsequently under him, released a statement acknowledging his reinforced position that there is no agreement. And this agreement was essentially reached between a group of random individuals, activists as they're dubbed by Damascus, who were asked to come to Damascus to reach some sort of deal. Talks are happening, but there is a rejection from the Damascus regime to accept any of the fundamental requests by the Druze in southern Syria, and therefore this is not going to be reached. But if we focus on the northern part of Syria, Ms. Riboua, Turkey is also looking at various elements within Syria. It's, of course, one of its projects, if we're putting it bluntly, the success of the HTS regime in Damascus. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree is there a frustration in Ankara vis-a-vis Jerusalem's efforts to establish certain red lines and maintain those for southern Syria?
Well, I think that the biggest problem from a Turkish perspective is really Israel's support for the SDF, but it's also a U.S. support for the SDF. And I think that the agreement that was reached 2 days ago between the SDF and the interim government of Syria is going to facilitate, I believe, some of the diplomatic outreach, or at least open new channels, because let's not forget that from the Turkish perspective, PKK adjacents, all of these groups are for Ankara a real threat, a real terrorist threat on their borders, and for them it's a very important issue. So I think that once there will be a diffusion of these tensions, we might see a certain type of accommodation happening, because it's in both Israel's interest and also Turkey's interest to have a stable Syria, but more than just a stable Syria, a Syria where Iran does not have access to the Mediterranean. And I think that this is something that Turks agree with. This is why Hakan Fidan, I think 2 weeks ago or last week, clearly stated that if Iran does not put an end to all of its proxies, then it should not be surprised that some of these groups attack inside Iran. This, I think, was an immense shift in Turkish policy, because it's very public. It actually led to Iran summoning the Turkish ambassador. So I think this Turkish-Iran rivalry will, I think, pave the way for Israel to see where its interests are. I mean, let's not forget, of course, there are a lot of issues when it comes to Erdogan, in terms of his rhetoric regarding Gaza, and a lot of these issues. But here there's I think a strategic question of how to conduct a deconflicting strategy where Israeli interests and also U.S. interests are being preserved.
Absolutely. Well, let's shift gears to Lebanon. General Sofrin, there are discussions between Israel, Lebanon, alongside mediators from the United States and France with regard to potentially demarcating the blue line, so-called, which is the border essentially between Israel and Lebanon, alongside even prospects for normalization in the long run. What can you tell us about that?
First of all, there are 13 points along the border that are in dispute between Israel and Lebanon and Lebanese government, not with Hezbollah, but Lebanese government. And I emphasize that this is between Israel and Lebanese government. That means that these things have to be solved by negotiating, by trying to mediate, maybe by the Americans or somebody else. I probably presume that this will be the Americans, to get to some agreement about these 13 points and to get along and to find some arrangement that will satisfy both sides. I don't believe that we're going to normalization right now, even though President Trump spoke about normalization with Lebanon and with Syria as well. This is a long way to go. Hezbollah is still there, is still in Lebanon, still trying to find itself and to stabilize itself within this government or within this regime that is now controlling Lebanon. And this is going to be a long process, but this is the beginning. First of all, to solve out all these disputes, and then to see how we can move on to some normalization, if it may happen. I think this will be a great achievement.
Absolutely. When guns stop blazing, diplomats start talking, and this is always a spark of hope. General Gavish, with that being said, Hezbollah is not just sitting idly by and rolling over. They are actively pursuing their rearmament, with the Islamic Republic of Iran pushing funds into Lebanon, particularly, something that, of course, is taken into account.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, they are continuously trying to do it. As we talked before, we are continuously denying those capabilities. But I also, or those trials what the Hezbollah is trying to do. But I think it is very important to look and see, and hopefully it would be also one of the answers to our region, is what would happen with Lebanon, what would happen with the leadership in Lebanon, how strong would they be with the support of United States, France, Saudi, and others. I think this is super, super important to see how this is being developed, because we could understand that there is a difference between the interest of Lebanon as a state and the Hezbollah within Lebanon. So this really could be another contributor to some, I would say, I don't know if peace, but something which is better that could happen in the northern part of Israel. And it would be an historical one, because this would be maybe returning back to the history of good relations that we had with Lebanon. But times will tell, and we hope that this is what would happen. Going back to the Hezbollah, bottom line, they are trying. Israel is doing everything it could in order to deny it. This is exactly the origin of some of the strikes that we saw in the northern part of Israel.
Absolutely. Ms. Ribo, I'd like to ask you, since prior to the October war, we saw the Iranian proxy Hezbollah pretty much holding the government hostage in efforts to try to reform, which the government had to do in order to gain some significant funds in order to save the country from the abyss. Unfortunately, deep-rooted corruption continues to plague Beirut. What is happening in this regard, and to what degree can we be optimistic that the latest developments will somehow infuse some hope for the Lebanese people who've been experiencing many hardships when it comes to the economy?
I am very optimistic for the simple reason that that Israel has actually finished Hezbollah. And I think that was really a big step towards making sure that a proxy, a very powerful proxy, doesn't have the ability to operate as it did before. It is in a very precarious situation, and all of the initiatives and other related developments regarding aid, assistance, etc. I see them more as short-term cuts to help Lebanon stand. But that being said, I think we're probably going to see a bigger reconfiguration of the Lebanese scene without Hezbollah, simply because I think especially since Iran was not able to save Assad, it was not able to save Hezbollah, its attraction and what made Iran appealing is not there anymore, and therefore a lot of these groups are going to find ways to either cooperate, find a consensus. I think there is a lot of optimism in that way. And as I mentioned before, the rise in Turkish Iran rivalry is also going to facilitate some of that.
Indeed. Well, I will mention this. Hezbollah may be on its knees, but it's not entirely eradicated. It is a headless chicken, with the Iranians pretty much sticking on this headless chicken a head of its own, a makeshift head, if I may call it that way, and if this analogy makes sense. But nonetheless, this needs to be closely monitored, and it is closely monitored, and the Lebanese people have suffered enough under the cruelty of the Ayatollah regime's influence and the hardships that were brought upon these people. But let's shift gear to the Gaza Strip. General Sofrin, we're talking about ongoing negotiations under the leadership of U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. There is a proposal, the Witkoff proposal, for the release of 10 hostages, if I'm not mistaken, in exchange for many terrorists, including those living or serving life sentences for the bloody murder of many Israelis, and not only Israelis, if I may add, and also extend the ceasefire. What can you tell us beyond that?
I think that the facts are known to everybody. The proposal that Mr. Witkoff laid is to release 10 people from the Israelis that are imprisoned or held by Hamas, to release people that are imprisoned in Israel, to extend the ceasefire for 60 more days. Now, the fact that the Israeli government denies that may be implying that this is what is going to happen, and this is what they're negotiating about. Because usually when things are true, immediately you find somebody in Israel that denies everything and say this is bullshit. Excuse me for the word, but nobody really means to go this way. The fact is that I believe that this is going to be the next step, maybe not 60 days, maybe less. But to some extent, this is going to be probably because the US implying a lot of pressure on the mediators and on the Hamas, of course, on the second hand, even though they had direct negotiations before. And I believe that this is going to be the solution right now for the time being. And let's see what happens next. On the other hand, the fact that the new chief of general staff is declaring that the IDF is considering to be able to control whatever gets into Gaza Strip, I mean humanitarian aid, is a change of position from what used to be before, with a former chief of general staff that denied any attempt to go this way and said this is only the problem of the Gazan people, and of course the UN and all the other entities that are dealing with that. But this is a change of position, and we have to watch it carefully, because this may lead to the fact that Israel is going to apply military control or military civilian control upon Gaza Strip, with an attempt to exchange the regime of Hamas controlling Gaza Strip.
Indeed. General Gavish, I'd like to ask you, and we don't have very much time and still, excuse me, 3 topics to go through, so bear with me. When we're talking specifically about the Gaza Strip, IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, came also to the Gaza Strip, where there was a change of command ceremony for the Southern Command with the new incoming general highlighting his intention to pursue whatever necessary to achieve victory.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, and I think this is the main issue. We are not there yet. The goals of the war were not achieved yet. We have to remember it. Not the positioning of the Hamas, of course, the hostages that we want them back in Israel as much as we can fast, and all of them. So we're not there yet. So I think that this is the first statement that was done by the new commander, and I think this is what Israel is looking for. At the end of the day, we are a democracy. This is a military that will do whatever the cabinet and the political level will tell us to do. And I think that at the end of the day, and the bottom line, the IDF is ready for all options, to whatever it would be needed to do. Also, in the Gaza Strip, one of our 7 different, I would say, areas that we are looking within our region.
Ms. Riboua, I'd like to hear your take on the Gaza Strip, but also from a regional perspective. How are the Arab countries looking at the current state of play?
Actually, from what I can tell, is that Arab countries are paying more attention to what Washington is saying than what is actually happening on the ground. I think for them, it's very important to make sure that Washington is on board. Egypt has its 3-phase plan. Saudi Arabia is backing it from the reports I'm seeing. UAE as well. They are very eager to please Washington. I think they also prepared a deal of more than $50 billion when it comes to the reconstruction. So I believe that from the Arab states' perspective, the most important part is to get Washington on board. Otherwise, they will feel that they're being sidelined, etc. And I think that will be an important factor. Why? Because for Israel has tried to engage with Arab states for a very long time, and Arab states have tried to come up with plans and projects for a very long time. All of this failed. And I think Trump being very disruptive about it, that we're going to build Gaza, rebuild Gaza, have a beautiful Gulf in Gaza. I think all of this is really making them this time more aware of what Washington is doing, because it's really disrupting all of the plans they've already had. So I think this is the most important thing to track, is how Washington is responding. What are the plans they are proposing? I think Marco Rubio also said that, he says to many of these Arab countries, if you have a better plan, come up with it. We're open to talk about it. And this, I think, is very clever, because he's engaging them in a way that before it was very hard.
Well, he's forcing them to think outside of the box, which is brilliant. But in any event, we have still 2 topics and not enough time to do so. 1 minute for each. And the 2 topics is Iran and Yemen. So, General Soflin, we'll start with Iran for you. If you could give us a little bit of an understanding, how do they react to the latest developments vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip?
First of all, they don't react directly with what happens in Gaza Strip. They still go on and declare that they support, of course, the Palestinians, and they want to be able to support them as much as we can, and not to allow any genocide in Gaza Strip. And the second issue is that they are more concerned with what happened with the American administration, the fact that Mr. Trump gave them some kind of what we call let's say, ultimatum that if you not apply, we are going to engage, and we are going to apply what we call maximum pressure. And therefore, this is what is more concerning for them, more than Gaza Strip.
Absolutely. General Gavish, the Houthis in Yemen have come to the point where the ultimatum which Abdel Malik al-Houthi has announced has expired. Therefore, now we can expect the resumption of attacks against freedom of navigation in the Red Sea?
Well, I think it was always there. I don't think that really something really changed on this area. They are still threatening the the navigation, the routes of the naval ships toward the west or the Middle East and other. We have to remember that one of the countries that is mainly being affected by it's Egypt. And nothing is going through the Suez Canal. I wouldn't say nothing, but the amount of ships that are going there are very, very low, causing them a huge damage. So this is not only an issue of Israel. We have to continuously remind it to everyone. This is a problem of the Middle East, of the Arab countries, Saudi, Egypt, others, but also the West. And I believe that if the Houthis would behave or would react, they should get an answer from the West and not only from Israel. But of course, Israel is ready to whatever he had to do.
Absolutely. Ms. Ribois, you have 1 minute. To what degree can the United States at this point in time frustrate Iranian efforts to continue to fuel this efforts by the Houthis to disrupt freedom of navigation and threaten U.S. allies and partners in the region?
Well, I think that I think the Houthis were already designated as a foreign terrorist organization, I think, a few weeks ago. But I think this time, under this administration, we will see some sort of response. Why? Because the United States, because for maritime security is really the backbone of U.S. power. And I think I think this administration will very much pay attention to it. I think we will maybe also see that Washington could increase military and diplomatic support for Israel in response to the threat, especially that there were more than 100 attacks on shipping. This really disrupts the whole configuration of trade. So I think we will definitely see an escalation. That would actually push the United States into more of a military involvement. But at this point, because Iran is weak, proxies are weak, going after the Houthis will not be a bad thing.
Absolutely. Well, Ms. Ribois, General Gavish, and General Sofrin, thank you so very much for all of your valuable insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. The Middle East, home to the cradle of civilization, retains a reputation from time immemorial as one of the most complex, conflict-ridden regions of the world. A cluster of nations, religions, powers, and influences, Mideast intricacies pose conundrums to even the most astute individuals. Bombarded daily, indeed every minute, by a barrage of information, some accurate, yet most of it less so, TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio every Tuesdays and Fridays for content that truly matters.